Ghanaians believe that their transformation will not occur on the back of parties, but on the back of leadership. It's a question of leadership.
All right, welcome to today's edition of Alan Speaks Primetime Show, and we're recording from the studios here in Pan-African Television. I'm so privileged to be seated with the Honorable Alan Kojo Kyerematen, and I'm sure if you have been following, the first episode brought you some overview of the life of Alan Kyerematen, the work of Alan Kyerematen, and an understanding into the Great Transformational Plan. And I'm sure you are aware that the plan is a cluster of ideas which have been forged together into a manifesto that will be brought to the good people of this country. Today, though, we are going to be highlighting on one very important aspect of the Great Transformational Plan, which has got to do with youth development. And so, if you are joining us, welcome. My name is Kwame Usudan. So let's go for a quick break. When we come back, I'll introduce you properly to the man, Alan Kojo Kyerematen. Stay with us.
I say, you be who know me who be away. I say, the echoes of the air, so when I say, be the Christ of Baby, you may. I say, the ref is a bit jarring. I say, Alan Cash. I say, the this car calls upon wine. I say, and the car labash. I say, that's a blue cannibal. I say, and a pie balu. I say, my hand in the bride. I say, everything I do. I say, before shine your eye. I say, before you shine your shoe. I say, well, I won't nine it. I say, you want to wear bamboo. I say, hey, I say, I say, Munjai, I say, I say, I dey come like Alan Cash. I say, Alan Cash, plenty money for my bank. I say, for my bank. I say, I say, I say, Munjai, I say, I say, I dey come like Alan Cash.
Welcome back from that quick commercial break. Like I told you, this is Alan Speaks Primetime Show, and I am Kwame Usudan. So welcome, Honorable Alan.
Thank you very much.
So the first episode was very insightful. You walked us through your journey, and I'm sure right now a good number of the Ghanaian people have come to appreciate who you are, even though you are like an open book. All of us do know who you are. But today we have a different task. Today is to understand the specificities in the Great Transformational Plan. And I'm happy that you've decided to start with the youth. So tell us, give us an overview of the youth policy in GTP.
Very well, and thank you very much for hosting me today. The problem of unemployment for the youth in Ghana is actually an existential threat, and it's gradually turning to become a security problem in our nation. If you look at the available statistics, those aged between 15 and 45 constitute almost 50% of our population. So that's a significant component of the population of our country.
Right.
Regrettably, 26% out of this number are unemployed. So if you have 26% of 50% of your population without jobs, then that's a very serious problem.
That's a very serious problem. Now,
it also means then that you don't have the purchasing power in your economy. And if you don't have the purchasing power in your economy, then there's no incentive for those who produce to increase the level of production. And when you don't produce, you cannot employ. If you can't employ, it reduces the potential for government to earn income from direct taxes. So it is a very serious fundamental problem that confronts us. But again, about 300 people come out of our tertiary institutions every year. 300,000 people graduate from our tertiary. And if those who are already out of school in the job market do not have jobs, and you are increasing that number every year, 300,000 people coming into the job market, then it's a compounded problem. And so government needs to have a robust policy agenda to deal with this problem. Otherwise, if it gets out of hand, we get into the situation that now is confronting Kenya, it's come to Nigeria, it happened in Tunisia, and God forbid, I don't want to sound like a prophet of doom, but the last thing for us to have on our hands is a revolution, a civilian revolution led by the young people.
I want to believe that it's against this background that in the GTP, particularly the one specific to the youth, you have decided to undertake a comprehensive assessment of the state of infrastructure of all existing youth leadership institutes and resources centers across the country. Can you explain that further?
I felt that, unlike what has happened in the past, if you're seeking for political office, you need to start off from where others have left off. And so this first policy recommendation is for us to look at what is in the system. And we have 10 youth resource centers of excellence. You know Kaneshi Complex?
Yes.
There are about 10 of those resource centers dotted all over the country. And these are meant to be multi-use facilities, about 5,000 seater capacity. So those are the youth resource centers. But in addition to that, you have 11 youth leadership institutes going back to President Nkrumah's time. So I want to find out exactly the state of infrastructure of these centers and of the institutes. That becomes the starting point. And once you do an assessment of the current state of infrastructure, then you know where you are. And then you can move on to the next step, which then becomes the second policy prescription, which is based on this assessment. And then you undertake a comprehensive program for renovating, retrofitting, re-equipping, depending on what you find out in the assessment exercise, so that you have at least basic infrastructure that sets you off on the new path to support our young people.
I'm sure you'll be inclined to share with us some of the findings that perhaps you've made over the period, particularly because you have been an active player, in governance over this period. And so based on that, can you share a few of them with us so that we
Yes,
can...
absolutely. This can only be an overview, high-level overview.
Absolutely.
Because that's why I'm starting off with a comprehensive assessment that's going into the future. Now, what generally is known is that most of these centers or institutes do not have the complement of facilities that will help train our young people. And some of those that were constructed many years back that are supposed now to train the young people in these institutions. So it doesn't look good. The picture now with these centers, the picture is not good. And so once we do an assessment, the gap that needs to be filled becomes our starting point. Yeah.
And this will find expression in I believe, a proper design of the youth policy.
Yes.
And that will have all these facets come together, you know, to form that umbrella document that you will use for the purposes of ensuring that the youth benefit from your policy. Right?
Yes, that would be one component of the youth policy. Yeah.
I also see here that you want to review and rationalize the mandates, management, and operations of all existing youth leadership institutions and organizations, and consolidate those with overlapping functions.
Yes.
What was running through your mind when you were brooding over this idea?
Much. So it's good to assess the current state of infrastructure and the facilities of these centers. But going beyond that, you have so many institutions, programs, and other things that are supposed to support youth development. For example, you have the Youth Employment Agency, YEA. But you also have the National Authority. What are the mandates of the NYA? What is the YEA supposed to do? And once you interrogate the functions and the mandate of these two institutions, you find that there's a very serious overlap. And if you are seeking to reform the public sector, that immediately becomes one of the first things that you do. And you're saving so much money by consolidating these institutions and then also rationalizing the activities. So that is not just a question of the infrastructure. It's also, why do you have so many institutions doing almost the same thing? So that's the purpose of the second prescription.
I'm happy seeing here captured an expansion of the operations of business resource centers and technology. And I'm excited about it because we are in the age of AI, artificial intelligence. And, you know, a lot of the young people are very interested in that space. So can you explain further what that policy is and how you intend to drive that?
So the whole idea was that once you look at the infrastructure and you look at the mandates of these so-called institutions targeting the youth, now you find in this third one that they need to be channeled into opportunities for job creation. That is the bottom line. It's not enough for you to train the young people, but after you've trained them, you need to be able to put them into self-employment or into employment. Now, we have taken the position in the GTP that it doesn't make sense for any young Ghanaian to leave school and be in a position where they don't have a job. And so the proposal that we've made here is that those who want to get into self-employment, you need to have an entry point into learning how to start your own business.
Right.
And the business resource centers and the technology solution centers were created when I was Minister for Trade and Industry in the current administration. And these resource centers, 67 of the business resource centers, dotted in different districts, are supposed to provide a comprehensive range of business support services for people, particularly young people who want to start their own businesses. So you come out of school. It is not for you to be waiting to find a job. Have you thought about doing something for yourself? And if so, where do you start from? That would be the dilemma of any young person. Where do I start from? Yes, I don't have a job. Maybe I've gone through the youth resource center, but then I want to start something on my own. So the business resource center becomes your starting point, and they will provide you with all that you need to get you started, and then actually later on help you to prepare a business plan and link you to a financing institution. And it may sound so simple, but that's the reality. You talk about all these mega entrepreneurs in the United States, in other parts of the world, they all went through the same process. Some of them actually left school and then started their own business, but they went to centers and institutions like the business resource centers, which are dotted around the whole of the United States, and received support in terms of hand-holding, how to start your own business, how to be linked to a bank. Mark Zuckerberg, who is the founder of Facebook, all of them started that way, through similar centers that support entrepreneurs. So that's the whole idea of the business resource centers. And because we, at least through my efforts, we established 67 of these business resource centers, and then about 21 of the technology solution centers. There ought not to be a situation where somebody comes out of school, 2-3 years, he doesn't have a job, and he's still waiting to be employed. So if Alan becomes president, we're going to make full use of these resource centers, the business resource centers. That is why it's part of the proposal.
Right. It's brilliant. But on the sidelines of that, I just need a little clarification.
Yes.
If you want to prove parity with this particular policy and that of NAPCO, what distinction can you draw? Because it appears that it has not a similar model, but it appears that is similar. You know,
it's not similar.
So it appears.
It appears.
So can you explain to us in great detail what this policy actually means?
Yeah. Regrettably, I have to say this, but NAPCO was a policy failure. You see, NAPCO was intended to create social jobs, as I would put it. And the whole idea was that those who come out of school and are looking for jobs will then be put into different institutions to give them a sense of employment as a transition to formal, regular employment. But the reason why I'm saying it's a failed job, a failed policy, is that it is obvious that there has been no transition from NAPCO trainees to formal employment. And secondly, also, it was not structured in a way that allows those who are absorbing these NAPCO trainees to be able to have the appetite or the incentive to even retain them. So the kind of things that we are talking about in the GTP is more business oriented.
Right.
This was more social enterprise oriented. But we're talking about hardcore business orientation, so that you put people who have come out of school into situations where they either now can start something on their own, or then they are able to join a formal employment in a company that government has supported. So there are two different things.
Guess what, I'm convinced. This is actually very good. Now, there's another line in there which looks at innovative, affordable home ownership scheme.
Yes.
I love this.
Yes.
You know, and I like the fact that you are also able to identify how many students, we churn out from the universities every year.
Yes.
Over 300,000. That's quite huge.
Yes.
And I like the fact that you're trying to draw some interlinkage between job creation and affordable, innovative homes.
Yeah.
But I think that's only my view.
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant. But convince the young people out there and explain to them in some better understanding. I mean, for them to have a better understanding, as to what this actually means.
And I'm very pleased that you seem to be processing this.
Yes. There's some chronology.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, so you come out of school.
Right.
You have an opportunity through these business resource centers to start something on your own. Or alternatively, government provides support to existing companies to expand the entry point for young people. Now, but once you are now employed, you have to start thinking about, where do I put my head? And most people at that age are eager to leave their parents.
True.
To start building their own families.
True.
To own a home.
True.
Now, right now, there's absolutely no possibility for a young person ever to dream to be able to own a house until maybe 5, 10, 15 years. So what this proposal is suggesting is that in Ghana, the critical need to deal with such problems is to have a mortgage financing institution. A mortgage financing institution will be able to provide a long-term loan for young people who are in gainful employment to be able to buy a house and then pay on a monthly basis very reasonable amounts to cover the cost of the house over a 30-year period. I mean, those of our brothers and sisters, our relatives who live outside this country and who would tell you that they have houses, all those houses are mortgaged houses in the sense that they are financed by a mortgage financing institution. So that's exactly what this proposal is saying.
Okay.
Now, once you have a mortgage financing institution, then because the GTP is providing an opportunity for young people to be employed or to be self-employed, they will earn income. And then they can pay monthly installments over a long period of time, maybe 30 years, but through a mortgage financing institution. But then it means that government that is supporting a mortgage financing institution must ensure that it is affordable housing that is at the center of this policy agenda.
So you're saying that this is going to be different from the already existing mortgage arrangements that I think Ghana Home Loans or something like that provide some mortgage services. So you're going to, this is tailor-made.
It's tailor-made.
Right.
It's a dedicated financing institution. See, Home Finance came in at a time when they saw that there was a big gap. It started more as a commercial universal bank, but they realized that there was a gap in the market for home financing. But if you look at the terms of the home finance company and other commercial banks that have sought to do, let's say, mortgage financing, that is not proper mortgage financing because the term is too short and your monthly deductions are such that it's almost impossible for young people who have just come out of school and started work to be able to pay the kind of installments. But a proper, dedicated, special mortgage financing institution would have access to long-term funds, including pension funds, including other sources of long-term funds. And then that's the kind of we call it patient capital, that you can use to back a mortgage financing scheme. So if your brother tells you, I own a house in New York, it's probably on a mortgage, a 30-year period. But hey, I mean, it's still your house.
Absolutely.
But the key is that you must be able to have a paycheck every month to be able to afford it. So all these things are connected. You see, the reason why in Ghana we seem to be doing so many things, but they don't come together. If you try and understand what I'm saying with GTP, it is very well structured.
Absolutely.
You come out of school. Now, what you learn in school does not necessarily put you in a job.
Yes.
So you have these youth resource centers that I was talking about. That's where you go for additional skills training to qualify you
for the job market.
For the job market. But that's only the beginning. Now, at that point, you are ready to go into the job market. So if you decide that you want to go into self-employment, then the business resource centers become where you go to. And then they can help you set up your own business.
Yeah.
If you decide that you want to go and have a job, then that's another route.
Right.
But in both cases, immediately after you come out of school and you go through the skills training, maybe 3 months from the centers, then you have a paycheck. Once you have a paycheck, then almost immediately you qualify to have a house, a home. And it may sound like a dream, but it's not complicated.
Right.
It is all coming together. Because once you have somewhere to put your head, then you can start your family.
Absolutely.
When you start your family, then you start growing into the economy itself. Of course, you also pay taxes to government. And that's how it all reinforces each other.
Right. I'm going to go for a quick commercial break. But before the commercial break, I just want a better understanding of this. And because you would admit that right now we have a lot of the young people traveling out of this country. And in my estimation, the survival of this policy is firmly grounded in the security of it.
Yeah.
Now, what is the guarantee? Have the benefit of chronological explanation of how things would be, but what is the guarantee that this will actually survive? Particularly because we know that young people are leaving this country.
Yes.
How would we ensure that they stay here and enjoy that which you seek to introduce?
So from what I've told you now, you can see that there's a sense of hope.
Absolutely.
I mean, people leave only when there's no hope. But you can see from the GTP, and as we continue, that immediately after you come out of school, there are all these opportunities available to you. So why would you want to venture into the unknown? So that's the first thing. And if the GTP provides that framework, then it's also a guarantee for your future. But then the same GTP recommends that many other countries scan globally for skills, to import skills. And Ghana has always had that privilege of having very well-trained young people who, when are employed anywhere in the world, always excel and stand out. So that in itself then becomes an opportunity. But then that must be a structured program of exporting skills. So one of the recommendations, policy proposals, is to establish a program called the Ghana Skills Export Program, where a young person who comes out of school, you have an opportunity, as I said, either for self-employment through that entry point with the business resource centers, or you go into formal employment. Now, if you decide after a number of years that you want to have the opportunity of learning or exposing yourself to what happens in other countries, then you can go into a special program of this export skills program where you are specifically trained depending on the demand of the important countries. You go into that program and then you are actually placed by the government in a job outside the country. And government is interested in this because, yes, you are creating employment, even if it's outside. But then also, there's a condition that allows government to earn some benefit or income from remittances that will come from those who go on this skills program.
Right. There's some modicum of truth in this assertion that usually the creation of policies is one that is centered just around the formal sector. And throughout the conversation, we are talking about graduates. What becomes of the person who did not have the benefit of education and for which reason they are unable to, formally benefit from this policy? But before you answer that, let's go for a quick break.
Kakata when I say, you be who know me who be away. I say, here goes the air, so when I say, Obi the Christ about you may. I say, the ref is a bit dry, I say, Alan Cash, I say, the Nisika is upon wine, I say, and the Calabash, I say, that's a blue caliber, I say, never pie balu, I say, my hand in the bride, I say, everything I do, I say, before shine your eye, I say, before you shine your shoe, I say, go I won't nine it, I say, you want to work on boo, I say, hey, I say, I say, Munjai, I say, I say, I come like Alan Cash, Alan Cash, plenty money for my bank, I say, for my bank, I say, I say, I say, Munjai, I say, I say, I come like Alan Cash, I say.
This is Alan Speaks Primetime Show. My name is Kwame Osuda. So before the break, we were trying to understand the youth policy in the Great Transformational Plan. And we are in the studios with Honorable Alan Kojo Shamanton. And he's explaining to us in great detail the policy and what it means for the youth of this country. Before the break, I asked you a question pertaining to the informal sector and the formal sector, because you explained how the young graduates will benefit greatly from this policy, but also maybe you, not deliberately, but they look at the informal aspect of it. So can we touch on that and then we look at the other elements?
Very well.
Yeah.
It would have seemed
Yes.
that we are only interested
Yes.
in those coming out of
Absolutely.
Formal
Absolutely.
education. But that's not the case.
I wanted to be a carpenter.
No.
I wanted to be a carpenter when I was
But
growing
in
up.
actual fact, the proposals in the GTP are skewed more towards those who are unskilled and the semi-skilled.
Right.
But there are specific opportunities targeted at different levels of skills. Okay. So, for example, if you look at the unskilled and the semi-skilled,
Right.
the GTP provides that 10% that banks will be required to allocate 10% of their profits to support non-concessionary lending, but specifically targeting young people who may not have any skills, but who are on their own starting a program. Because one of the challenges of the skilled, unskilled, and semi-skilled is access to financing.
Absolutely.
If, as you said, your dream was to become a carpenter, one of the things that you would have been thinking about was how to be able to get money, capital, to start your own small carpentry shop. But in this case, one entry point is that if you went into a bank, because you don't have what they call, in one of them, it says that you don't have collateral. Obviously, the formal banking sector will be close to you.
Area, yeah.
It's a no-go area.
Yeah.
But this GTP proposal is saying that the banks would allocate the equivalent of 10% of their profits to the provision of non-collateral-free concessionary lending. So it means that those banks that are being referred to here will provide loans and other credit facilities that will be concessionary in terms of the interest rates. It means reduced interest rates, and then also it will be collateral free. Because if you went into a bank and you didn't have collateral, then you will not have access to a loan. So that's one very specific proposal that the GTP is making, because government will incentivize the banks to be able to provide this collateral-free concessionary lending. Government has an interest in supporting the unskilled and the semi-skilled. And the banks are also interested in lending. But if government will support the banks to be able to provide collateral-free lending, then they are in business. Then they can lend to those informal companies that otherwise...
What it means is that a number of the young people on the streets selling dog chains will be reduced.
Completely, because now you would have an opportunity to transition into something more substantial than trading and hawking in the streets.
Which is even risky.
And it's even risky. And apart from that, I don't think that there's any young person who just wants to stay in the streets. I mean, if they can get access to capital and start a small business, they would rather graduate from there. Another proposal that would support the informal sector is the establishment of a traders bank.
Right.
I mean, this is the most innovative proposal that the GTP would introduce into financial intermediation in Ghana. Because again, can you imagine the number of people who trade in Ghana? 60 to 70% of Ghanaians are involved in trading one way or the other. And if they are pulling their resources together with government support, by government establishing a traders bank on their behalf. So this is not a government bank, but this is government providing the seed fund for traders to own their own bank. If they own their own bank, then it means that when those who are either in the informal sector or the formal sector, it means that you can go to your own bank. And it is almost like now regularizing the SUSU structure, but now formalizing it into a traders bank. But do you know that, for example, the teachers who are in the union, teachers union, because they pool their resources together, they are able to establish large-scale investment projects. They own hotels, they own hostels, they own other big businesses because they pool their resources together. But if teachers can do this, how much more in terms of numbers, how much more those in the trading community? So this is going to be a major source of support to those in the informal.
Do you know why I'm smiling?
Sector.
Imagine we had Aboso Kind Bank and then Makola Markets Bank. You know, that would be very exciting. Actually, that's a smart plan.
Absolutely, and it is in the interest of the government and the Bank of Ghana to be able to support the establishment of these traders banks, because the informal sector in our economy is so significant that you have to have a way of dealing with them. You were worried, you were talking about those on the streets. But the only thing they need is to be able to have access to affordable capital. And once they do that, you gradually transition them into formal enterprises. They will grow over time. And when they grow, then your economy expands. If your economy expands, then you employ more people, you pay more taxes, and then the economy turns around. So it may sound very easy, but indeed it is easy. But you need the right policy framework. And that is why the GTP is focusing on policy solutions. And if you think through it properly, they are all integrated.
You are telling us the how. Now, I see some correlation between 9 and 10, but also some dichotomy, because the 9 appears to be addressing the concerns that I had earlier relative to the informal sector. The 10 appears to be dealing with the formal sector. So if you read the 9, for instance, it says banks to allocate the equivalent of 10% of profit after tax of the previous financial year to the provision of new collateral free concessionary lending to youth-owned micro, small, and medium enterprises engaged in import substitution, export development, agriculture, value chains, and general manufacturing. So the 9 appears to have some semblance of informal activities in there.
Informal and formal.
Informal. But if you come to the 10,
Yes.
says that leverage the Ghana Sovereign Wealth Fund to support innovative financing arrangements for startup companies, including but not limited to grant funding, angel investments, venture capital, leasing, and loan guarantees. Can you expand on that?
So you are processing this very well.
I am.
So you find a situation where through the previous facility that the banks would provide to support both the informal and micro and other enterprises, you have a situation where this GTP is proposing the establishment of a Ghana Sovereign Wealth Fund. In the matured economies, when the economy grows and the country becomes prosperous, they are able to put aside some of the income that comes into government into what they call a sovereign wealth fund. And it happens in most advanced economies. So this sovereign wealth fund is almost like the fund that the country has to support the population in general. And the idea here is that once you have the sovereign wealth fund, then you can allocate some of the funds in that fund to support the establishment of venture capital companies. Now, a venture capital company provides what is called equity financing. So if you're talking about a young graduate or even a non-graduate, it doesn't matter. You see, we have to be careful we don't just continue thinking that it's about coming out of school. No, but a young entrepreneur who wants to go into business, he doesn't have what they call a collateral security. He doesn't also have the equity. Normally when you go to a bank, they'll ask for two things: collateral security and then equity. Now, the previous proposals that we dealt with was talking about collateral free, but they will still ask for equity. What is your equity in this business? Now, many young people who have neither the security nor the equity. So whilst you, on one hand, you deal with the collateral security aspect of the problem, now what about the equity? So you introduce venture capital financing. So venture capital puts equity in your business, and the equity now is what over time would be released back to you. So the venture capital company will invest, let's say, 50% into your company, or maybe for startups, they'll finance your business idea, because that's what venture capital companies do. So over time, when you start making profits, they will take out their money, their equity, and then the company now goes back to you. But for you to be able to create these venture capital funds, you either have to have individuals who have money and want to risk their funds or capital to support venture capital financing, because it's not easy to put your money behind a startup company with no experience, with no track record. It's a bit risky.
True.
So it is not usual for individuals to put their money in venture capital companies. But governments would have an interest in supporting the establishment of venture capital companies. Because if government has excess funds, which they put in a sovereign wealth fund, then they can allocate part of the money in the sovereign wealth fund to establish a venture capital company, for example. So that's what it refers to. So you are looking at the problem from different angles. If it's about collateral security, there's one way that the GTP deals with it. If it's about equity, there's another proposal that deals with it. And so whichever way you look at it, the GTP provides a solution.
Your team has indeed put together a great policy for the youth, because if you look at the point 12,
Yes.
it is talking about the provision of fiscal and non-fiscal incentives for new lending by banks for youth-owned companies operating in selected strategic sectors of the economy. First of all,
Yeah.
what is your definition of strategic sectors of the economy?
Yes.
And then we discuss the fiscal and non-fiscal incentives.
So for every economy, you need to prioritize sectors which would provide optimal or maximum benefits to the economy.
Right.
You know that Ghana has over the last 100 years been depending on only one export commodity, which is cocoa.
Cocoa.
I mean, it's strange. And it's difficult to understand why we cannot diversify our economy. So if you go into the GTP is proposing 10 new strategic sectors to expand the economy beyond cocoa. So if you have young entrepreneurs who want to go into any of these 10 new strategic sectors, like vegetable oils, like the petrochemical industry, so many other industries, then it means that government has an interest in the growth of these new sectors.
Yeah.
So then it is of interest to government to provide incentives,
yeah.
fiscal and non-fiscal,
non-fiscal.
meaning fiscal could be tax incentives,
Yeah.
and non-fiscal could be other support that they give to the banks. So this is saying that the government will provide fiscal and non-fiscal incentives for banks that are providing new lending. It's not about what you've given out already, but for young people who are now coming into business, those banks that will provide new capital to young people who are coming into business, then they will receive those tax breaks. So it means that government is making it easy for young people to be supported through these financial institutions by giving them all kinds of incentives. But then there are conditions. It means that as a young person, you must identify one of these new strategic sectors that government is interested in promoting. Once you are going into those sectors, then you can benefit from those facilities. So that's what this is about.
Yeah. So it's actually sinking in very well, because you've looked at how you are going to address these teething challenges confronting the youth from different perspectives, varied perspectives.
Yeah.
And then you looked at the banking sector and what they can offer the young people of this country.
Absolutely.
Now, what excites me is that you didn't just stop there.
Yeah.
You have actually also moved on to look at companies that will also offer some support to the young people.
Yes.
And I say this because in your explanation, you indicated that there are some people who will graduate and may want to start their own businesses. And for those ones, you are saying that the banks should try and support.
Yes.
Now, moving on, you're saying that there are other people who may also want to go into, to work for other companies. And for those ones, you're saying that any company that will employ these people will also have some grants. I mean, can you expand on that?
Yes. So, for example, as you rightly put it, those that want to go into self-employment have taken that path.
Absolutely.
Those and they are supported by banks because government is providing incentives to those banks. Now, those who want to go into formal employment, you have a situation where government is supporting those companies that are now prepared to take on new employees who are young people. Because from the initial discussion on the number of people who are unemployed, government has to find different ways of dealing with this problem. So if a company will now get an incentive from government, as long as they are prepared to take on new graduates, or not, when we say graduates, or
No, it's
new
okay.
employees.
It's okay.
New
I think that
entrants.
there's that we've explained that.
Yes,
So,
new,
yeah.
let's say new
Yeah.
young people.
Yeah.
As long as a company is prepared to, let's say, employ 10 new young people, then that incentive kicks in. So if you're a company and you realize that the government is going to give you a grant that would allow you to employ 50 young people. I mean, grant is free money. But government, why is government giving you a grant? Government is giving you a grant because they are interested in creating job opportunities for young people. So can you imagine a situation where companies now realize that if I'm able to create opportunities for 50 young people to come into my company, the government is going to give me a grant. So part of the grant you use in paying
skills development,
training, and then also for paying them at the end of the month. So it's a win-win for
I'm happy.
government.
You know why?
Yes.
Because I think the bottleneck for most of these young graduates is that when you apply for a job in any company, they say that 3 years working experience, 10 years working experience, 15 years. But the guy just graduated.
Yes.
So you are saying that, listen, enough of these 3, 4, 5 years.
Yes.
Employ them.
Yes.
But I will resource you.
Absolutely. Your processing is over. It looks as if you are now working your way into my government.
Okay, right. That's actually very good. And I'm happy that we are learning so much. We're still here with Honorable Alan Kojo Chemantin. This is Alan Speaks, and he's dissecting and trying to explain, the various segments of the youth policy in the Great Transformational Plan. And I'm sure you are following the conversation. He has explained the benefits to the young people within the informal sector and the formal sector. So nobody is left out in this conversation. Now, let's also look at how you are going to establish an industrial subcontracting scheme, which will directly link MSMEs to supply chain of large-scale enterprises.
So I'll give you one particular example. When I was Minister for Trade and Industry, one of the most celebrated Indian entrepreneurs came up to see me. And his problem was that he now has a franchise to establish the KFC franchise in Ghana. But one of the conditions is that it's either he has a continuous supply of chicken at affordable prices, or he would have to import chicken from outside. Now, obviously, this is a franchise, and this is a global franchise, KFC. So you have to maintain certain standards. His worry was that he cannot get enough chicken to buy from local sources, and needs tens and thousands of chicken every day to be able to feed all the KFC restaurants in Ghana. Unfortunately, it's not possible for him to get that kind of supply, so he has to import. So his inquiry or his interest in meeting with me was, can we not support companies, local companies, particularly young people, who can now go into poultry specifically to feed, let's say, the KFC restaurants? Because here it is, through subcontracting, it means that you have a guaranteed market for whatever you produce. Because almost invariably, once you have a market, whatever you produce will be bought. So any bank would give you a loan.
True.
Because you have a guaranteed market. So this proposal is meant to formalize this linkage between large companies and then small companies. Because you'll be surprised, many of the foreign companies in Ghana import literally everything.
True.
Including water, bottled water, including, as I mentioned to you, the food that they eat. And through this subcontracting arrangement, if there is a program that would link the small companies to the supply chain of the large companies, the large companies, they are not just interested in importing, because if you import, you need foreign exchange to import. So it is at a cost to you. But if you can get it supplied locally, then it's a win-win. It's a win for the large companies, it's a win also for the small companies. So this is what this subcontracting program, you have to formalize it. It will not happen by chance. Or the mining companies, you'll be shocked. They have to import literally all the supplies, that they need. But if there's a linkage with small companies that are producing to feed into the supply chain of the large companies, there's a major boost for a young company. So, for example, if you decided to start your own side business, then you would probably look for one of these subcontracting opportunities, because you know that you'll be producing, let's say, cartons directly to supply a particular company, which has already guaranteed an order for you.
Right.
So that's the subcontracting.
Wow. Wow. Quite revealing. Let's look at tourism.
Yes.
In Rwanda, in Singapore, in almost all these countries, they generate so much revenue from tourism. Unfortunately, in Ghana, the reverse is the situation. You are seeking to develop that sector and make it a youth-driven sector by supporting, local tourism companies that are within those tourism communities. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Because, as you said, you mentioned a few countries. When you go to any tourist destination, you find that there are so many small businesses that are clustered around the tourist site. Some of them producing souvenirs.
I bought one from Elmina Castle.
Some of them actually providing food and beverages for the tourists. Beads.
Yeah.
So what this GTP proposal is saying is that we have to create businesses around tourist locations that will be owned by young people.
Right.
So, for example, if you realize that you can set up a small handicraft business which will be sold to tourists who come to the Cape Coast Castle or the Elmina Castle, that in itself is a major opportunity, because government is supporting those young people who would like to develop businesses in and around the tourist sites. So that if you're a young person, then you already are targeting a particular tourist site. And it's not only the forts and castles. We have the Kintampo Falls, we have Kakum
National Park.
Kakum National Park. And if you knew that around those tourist locations, government is strategically providing opportunities for young people to set up small businesses to feed into the tourist attractions, then it becomes easy to attract young people. Yes.
So it's not
That's
just
how you build young enterprises into the tourism agenda.
But it's not just to create, but also to resource those that are already in existence.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, to resource those who are already there. Because frankly, one of the challenges with tourism in Ghana is that apart from those locations being attractive, there's nothing happening in and around the locations. You are aware of that?
That's a fact. Let's go for a quick break. Alan Speaks. We'll be right back.
kata weni asay yo be hu no me hu be wen asay de koso de esa weni asay obi de kwan se ba be yi me asay the refi se be dware wa ba asay alanka asay the sika ko esa pan wine asay ene kala ba asay na se bro kan ba asay never buy balu asay my me the bride asay everything I do asay before shine your eye asay before you shine your shoe asay who I want nine it asay you want to work on boo asay hey de asay de asay munjai de asay de asay I dey come like Alan Cash plenty money for my bank I say de I say munjai de I say de I say I dey come like Alan Cash I say.
Back, Alan Speaks with me, Kwame Owusu Danso. Now, Honorable, let's look at the biggest butterfly in the room.
Not the biggest elephant.
No, the biggest butterfly. And you know why I use butterfly.
Yes, I know.
I don't want to promote anybody.
Yes.
But which is rent, and it is. I mean, people are dying as a result of that. I've seen that you have highlighted that you are going to regulate that space. Please tell us what you intend to do in that space.
Yes.
You see, my voice has dropped.
No, I know.
Because I'm
it's
so passionate about
and
rent.
it's of concern to literally everybody.
Yes.
You recall in our previous discussions,
Absolutely.
we're talking about home ownership
Yes.
for young people,
Yeah, okay.
mortgage financing,
That's if you want to buy.
if you want to buy.
All right.
But you have so many other people who may want to rent property until after some time, then they can go into their home ownership scheme alternative. For this, if I tell you what young people are going through, a young person coming out of school, he doesn't have a job, and he has to find money to pay for what they call single room, hall and chamber, almost 1,800 cities. And if you have a small family and you need a 2-bedroom, you're talking 2,500 cities. And to add insult to injury, you are being asked to pay 2 years advance. Now, it means that unless government provides a framework for regulating these situations, then you are creating a major problem for young people who are already destabilized. And that is what this proposal is about, because it talks very specifically about reviewing existing legislation and regulations on rent and rent control with a view to facilitating housing for young people, especially first-time renters. And that's where the problem is. First-time renters, they are completely out of the game. So it's a major concern. And this is how to deal with it.
Will they also deal with this issue of accommodation on our campuses? The hostel facilities. This also finds expression in that?
It finds expression in that.
Right.
Because currently it is almost impossible, if you don't have access to some financing from a beneficiary to be able to even live in a hostel, whether on campus or outside campus. But the government has to have a way of incentivizing those who go into the construction of these hostels. That is the only way that they can also accede to government's requests for this rent control. If the government is not providing any incentive to those who construct these hostels, on what basis can government make a demand about rent, let's say, control. If you are a developer, you borrow money at the current interest rate,
29%,
30%, and you construct your hostel, you have to pay back. Otherwise, you also run into
interest,
penalties and arrears. So, if there's no incentive from government, how do you then incentivize such a person who has borrowed money to construct a hostel now to go by this rent control scheme that will support young people? So there has to be some support from government.
I'm happy because this one also is telling of the how.
Yeah.
It is not just the identification
No.
of the problem.
No.
We know the problem.
Yeah, as for
But
GTP,
actually,
GTP does not talk about the problem because you know about the problem. Everything is very specific. And the beauty of this is that you can imagine you come out of school, now the GTP is guaranteeing you an opportunity either to be self-employed or to work in a formal business. Now, if it is a formal business, government is providing incentives for those businesses to be able to employ young graduates who don't have experience. So already there's an entry point now for you to get a job, because companies now, because of the incentive from government, because of the grants, now can employ people who are not skilled.
And there's even an exit point too, because you're saying that you create banks for, so
and then whilst you now have a paycheck, government is saying that at the same time, he's creating opportunities for you to have your peace of mind. So it's either you want to own your own home, and then the entry point is the mortgage financing scheme, or if you want to rent, then government is providing incentives to those homeowners who want to join this scheme. And government will give them incentives so that they can also relax their rent conditions for young people, especially first-time renters. So you see that as a young person, if you are thinking seriously about your future, everything is in the GTP for you. And you can see it is not rocket science.
I'm sure in the subsequent episodes we will look at infrastructure.
Yes,
and
that is
particularly So we'll look at that, and I'm sure there will be an aspect of it that deals with.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Now, they say that the wealth of a nation is predicated on the health of its citizenry.
Yes.
The country Ghana, predominantly, we have about 60% of the population within the youth bracket.
Yes.
And those within that bracket are the driving force of the country's economy.
Yes.
Now, I am happy to see that you're saying that you want to create health booths.
Yes. Yeah.
So that you'll be able to identify or actually address their health concerns without it necessarily, leading them into some deteriorating state.
Yes.
So how do you intend to do that? Yeah.
Now, there are what we call lifestyle diseases.
Yes.
Diabetes. Yeah. Hypertension, in particular. Now, can you imagine a situation where, as it is now, that if you just want to check your blood pressure, you have to go to a hospital.
True.
And go and queue.
True.
And pay for consulting fees only to check your blood pressure. I don't know. You want to check your sugar level.
Sugar level, yeah.
Which is a 5 minutes. Yeah. You have to go to a hospital, a clinic, go and add your problems to those who are more seriously, ill. And then there's a lot of confusion in the health sector because we have not been able to address the challenges of the health sector in a systematic way. So what this is saying is that we will create 100,000 booths, or call them kiosks, health kiosks, at vantage points, which specifically will help test blood tests for hypertension, for sugar, common ailments, which does not require you to go to a hospital. Now, the beauty of this is that because these are small booths, they can, or they will be managed and owned by young people who have either come out of SHS or from
nursing training.
From nursing training, those ones will just qualify automatically. But even if you do not have formal nursing training, to measure the blood pressure of an individual is not rocket science. To test blood, see, these are all very simple things that any individual can be trained to do. So the beauty again of this proposal is that government will construct these kiosks with fiberglass, very nicely done, and would also provide all the equipment, because these are basic, your health, blood pressure monitor, what they use to check sugar, and then things like cholesterol and things like that. Advantage points, so that the young person who goes through this screening process and now owns one of these kiosks becomes basically an entrepreneur. You own this booth, and of course, a very reasonable charge, maybe 5 cedis, to check your pressure. So over time, it's a work and pay on a work and pay basis. And what
you have done through that, you would have created over 100,000 jobs.
No, that's exactly what.
That's
This is instant.
In fact, this is good. 100,000 jobs.
Yeah.
You want to undertake a special human resource capacity building programs for health and education personnel, and specifically for the purposes of meeting the high demand for health and educational professionals in foreign countries.
You remember we talked about this
that.
earlier
We've
on.
actually looked at that.
Yes.
You want to develop a special program for the return and deployment of highly skilled Ghanaians from the diaspora, including young diasporans, under a new Ghana Skills Bank project to reverse the brain drain.
See, when I was ambassador in the United States, from 2001 to 2003, during President Kufuor's term of office, I introduced what was called the Ghana Skills Bank, because I was interested in documenting the skills that we have in the diaspora. And I was amazed at the number of people in very high positions, particularly the young ones, 30 years, 35 years, 40 years, in very key positions in the United States and across the world. So this program is saying that you need a structured initiative that will bring some of these skilled personnel back into the country to support our development agenda. And it happens. Many of the high-performing economies, they have similar programs to bring back highly skilled, well-trained citizens who have the exposure abroad to come and then work in their home country. So whilst you export, which people used to call brain drain, now you also have a program that brings in skilled personnel, which is brain gain. So it's brain drain
equals
brain gain.
Fantastic. Now let's look at sports.
Yes.
And you've highlighted a number of things which addresses the concerns that we have relative to sports. You want to develop, and I'll put all of them together so that we address them. You want to develop a special program for the return and deployment. Okay, I think this one has to do with it. So invest in world-class new generation sports facilities in selected competitive sporting disciplines, including the establishment of sport academies to build the capacity of the youth in sports and sporting activities. You also want to promote community-based and grassroots sports development across the country to identify young talent. You also want to provide special funding to revamp school sporting activities across the country. Intako. Hey! And you want to also strengthen mentorship and counseling programs in youth. Okay,
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
Right. So now, look, when I was much younger, when I was living in Asante Mampo, I was a footballer.
Wow.
Yes, I used to play
Interesting.
for. I used to play for at those days.
Okay.
Red Lions.
Wow.
Red Lions, and then subsequently I played a little bit for Kumapem. So I was actually
seriously?
I was a proper footballer, and
I used to be a director for Cornerstones
oh, okay.
in the 80s.
Oh, I see. Okay, so yeah, I saw football back in the day was super exciting.
Yes.
The intercore, we move from one school to the other. But right now,
It's all
yes, it's all gone.
all gone.
And I'll be so excited if you revamp it when you get the opportunity to, because it also beyond the fact that it was providing some form of entertainment, it was also bringing about unity
amongst
the young people.
Yeah, amongst the young people.
It was so exciting. It was fun.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think I've even explained it for you. but I like it. Maybe but let's hear it from the horse's own
But
mouth.
you see, the point is that youth and sports go together.
Yeah.
And now we are talking about creating opportunities for young people. So although we've talked about formal employment for both skilled and unskilled young people, we are also talking now about strategically developing opportunities in the field of sports for young people. Because, look, it's not always just formal employment that can provide progression and satisfaction for young people. You know how many people have made it in life just through sports? So there are two sides of the same coin, but then it has to be done professionally and in a structured way. So what the GTP is saying is that government would provide incentives, and one thing that underpins the entire GTP is about private sector. Everything is about private sector. The government supporting the private sector to put their money into sports. So this is talking about government providing incentives for the private sector to construct and establish sports academies, because it's only when you have world-class sports academies that you can develop and train talented young people in various disciplines. And once you go through a structured program and disciplined program for training them, they become world stars. And once they become world stars, then the benefits accrue to the individuals and to the country. But you cannot expect government to find the money to establish, and the emphasis is on world-class sports facilities. So that is what the GTP is talking about. But obviously, beyond that, it says that now, apart from the academies and the other centers, we are also talking about grassroots communities, sports development. The sports academies will be at a higher level, and they will probably be in the urban centers. But then you have to go down also to the communities and find a way of stimulating interest in various sporting disciplines at the grassroots community level. So you catch them at different levels.
The coastal, I think we used to call it coast or something. Coast football.
The coast football. Colts,
Colts.
Colts football.
Okay.
And that's where a lot of the high-performing young people catch that whether you go to school or not,
you have
an opportunity if you feel that your talent is in sports. Because right now we've lost our boxing, I would say, sports. We've lost our boxing sport because government is not investing in the development of boxing gyms and promoting boxing.
Yeah. Even though you have explained the next item that I want to introduce, I think it's important to rehash it.
Yes.
The idea of strengthening mentorship and counseling programs.
Yes.
And in existing youth leadership institutions and youth resource centers. You've highlighted that.
Yes.
But what is most striking for me is the fact that you intend to aggressively promote a mainstream entrepreneurship training and economic empowerment initiative through all second cycle and tertiary institutions. That's one thing that we lack.
Yes, yeah.
So,
yeah.
highlight,
You see, when I'm sure you were in school,
yes,
you went to tech.
yeah, of course, the best school in the world.
And I'm sure you didn't have an opportunity really to think about business.
Maybe I was doing Marx, Abraham Marx, was it Karl Marx and all those ones? And I don't know, so, a lawyer.
But the point is that entrepreneurship, it's the key. Is the key to the prosperity of any business. That takes them right into tertiary institutions, and the kind of opportunities that are opened will be opened up by the GTP. Since by the time you already get out of school, then your mindset is about mindset. Entrepreneurship starts with a mindset, because where an individual sees problems, if you have an entrepreneurial mind, you see an opportunity.
Yeah.
And that comes with entrepreneurship mentoring and training. And it has to start right from the beginning. But if you have a situation where every young person is going to school only to come into government employment, then he said, how are you going to deal with this?
Right.
So all these opportunities are created for that.
There are so many we need to talk about. Look, you want to revamp and recapitalize and refocus the National Service Scheme, including but not limited to providing opportunities to you for a 1-year period of training in the security agencies upon graduation. Wow. Develop a comprehensive program for certified artisanal training and craftsmanship for the unskilled. I think this one, you explained it in the beginning. But let's look at the ones that I've put forward.
So here we have a proposal from the GTP that says that once you come out of school, first level SHS, now you go into a compulsory certificated program of internship and apprenticeship. This is after SHS. 1 year compulsory to get to university or the tertiary institution. You already have been working in a particular enterprise. It's all about private sector, business, getting people to tune their minds into business and how you can help yourself or help somebody else. So you either now go into that channel, or when you come out of school, you have the opportunity to go into what we call the military or security training for 1 year. Now, once you complete that training, then you are part of what we call the National Reserve Force. The defense and security of our nation is a development imperative. There's no doubt, particularly with the destabilization of our sub-region. And you don't always need a standing army to be able to address these security threats. But most countries have like contingent armies, or what I'm calling the national, for 1 year, and then you become part of the National Reserve Force. Now, when you're part of the National Reserve Force, it doesn't mean that you are part of the regular army. That's why I said National Reserve Force. But you have not just the training of the mind, but also the fact that when the need arises, you can be called to join the regular army for combating the security threats against the country. Now, those who opt not to go through that channel, then go through the Start Your Own Business program.
SYB.
SYB.
Yeah.
So it means that there's no single individual
who will be left out.
Who will be left out. As soon as you finish school, you either go this way, first year, or you go that way.
But you all meet at the same destination.
Yes, you all meet at the same day. So at least there's something that you get done.
Galamsey.
Galamsey.
Galamsey. How do we intend to address that? The mining sector.
The same business model.
Right.
This government began along the path that they will deal aggressively with Galamsey. It's obvious that this has not worked.
Right.
So you need a business solution. That's the only way. It cannot be a militarized solution. You need a business solution because these young people, whether you like it or not, they are already there. They are not going to leave. But they are there as galamseyers because what they are doing is illegal into small companies owned by these young people. So young youth-owned companies, mining companies, youth-owned mining companies, owned by them. And government then also provides seed capital for them to import all the equipment, mining equipment, and other facilities. And this is all government providing support to these young companies. And then also working with them on a buyback arrangement. Okay. So whatever they get from whatever they are doing, now government can buy it of them. But the icing on the cake is that government then provides the concessions. Because once you have a concession, then it's no longer illegal.
Right.
So then once you set up the youth-owned mining companies, Minerals Commission has to give them the mining license, EPA has to give them the EPA license. So you formalize them, you give them the licensing rights, you give them the equipment, you give them the working capital, you provide management support for them. This is all government facilitation. And then all of a sudden, what seemed to be a problem now becomes a structured solution.
Thank you very much. So can you explain to us the youth employment digital app that is seeking to employ over 3 million people?
Yes. So what this says is that young people who are going to benefit from the GTP have to be already programmed before the implementation of the GTP starts. Because there are so many job opportunities in the GTP to be created, as we've discussed.
Yeah.
So we need to start identifying those young people who will fill all those job opportunities ahead of the job opportunities themselves being available. And so before the end of the year, before we get into the elections, the GTP is going to create an app, a digital platform that would put 3 million young people on the app. And these are going to, within a matter of 1 and 1.5 years, you would have these 3 million jobs being created out of the opportunities for the GTP. And the reason why we're trying to program them into the app before the start of an Alam presidency is that first, it is a guarantee that once you get onto the app, you have a job already available for you. Once you get onto the app, because there are 3 million jobs guaranteed within a period of 1.5 years under an Alam presidency. But you need to get onto the app first so that we can interrogate what your interests are, and all the programs and projects that are being proposed by the GTP are all being profiled on the app, so that if your interest is going into the petrochemical industry, which is one of the strategic industries being proposed under the GTP, then already we can identify you as the potential candidate to fill a particular job. If your interest is in the automobile industry, we need to identify you so that we can already align you to those particular jobs. And the interesting thing is that it also helps us to immediately, Alan becomes president, to put you through a very rigorous training program to help you walk directly into the jobs. 3 million jobs within 1.5 years. And you need to be on the platform
to get a job.
To get a job.
Be on the platform, get a job. Thank you very much. Honorable Alan Kojo-Kyerematen, and this has been very insightful. This is an explanation of the youth policy in the Great Transformational Plan, and this will be, that will be it for us today. And let me remind viewers that this is going to continue. Honorable Alan Kojo-Kyerematen will be explaining to us the various clusters in
every
the
Thursday.
Great, yes, every Thursday. Right here on Pan-African Television and on some other platforms as well that we will make sure we bring out. But thank you very much for watching today's edition of Alan Speaks, and we'll come again next week. Stay with us. Bye-bye.